All right, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today for our most recent, now fourth edition of our Conversations with Faculty series. Really excited to be joined by Jackie Bartolomeo today. Jackie, as we'll get into, has an incredible background, is also an alum of our program, which we will talk about as well. But really excited, and feel free again to jump in with questions either through the chat or the Q&A, and we will attempt to answer all of them during our conversation today. So, Jackie, first, thanks so much for joining me today for this fourth iteration of our Conversation with Faculty series, and look forward to the chat. So let's start with your background. What did you do? What are you doing now? Talk us through the evolution of your career.
Great. Well, thank you for having me. Excited to be here today. So I did my undergrad at NYU. So I graduated from NYU in 2010 with a degree in communications. I had taken like one I think it was a sports marketing course through the business school at Stern. And, I was a sports fan, so I thought this might be interesting. So most of my internships in undergrad were actually in media and fashion. So had interned for a few different media companies, including Condé Nast and Hearst, for some of their like fashion magazines. And so that's where I thought that I was headed. And then had an opportunity, an internship opportunity with a PR firm. I wasn't really enjoying it. And I remember one of my friends asked me, like, what would be like your dream internship? I was like, oh, I'd love to intern for like the New York Rangers and like, Madison Square Garden. And so it was my last semester. And so I like blindly, I think I faxed my resume, definitely dating myself, but like I found like the HR person on LinkedIn or something like that. And I Googled them and I faxed my resume. And like, sure enough, it was late in the semester, but they had someone who had moved, like an intern who could no longer, hold the position. They were moving or something like that. So I interned for MSG in their sports and entertainment division. At that time, it was both. So I was in group sales for the Rangers, the Knicks, Radio City Music Hall, and then Beacon Theater at the time. So that was like my first like entree into sports. And then after graduating, I took a full-time internship with Major League Soccer in their communications department. And then I just started like applying for positions. And my first role was with Sports Business Journal. And then that's how I was also introduced to Columbia. So I didn't know Columbia had a sport management program, but SBJ, they have this issue every year that they release of all the colleges with undergrad and graduate sports management programs. And so I actually went on a sales call as an SBJ employee to meet with Columbia. At the time, it was Lucas Rubin. And he was like, oh, you should apply. And so I wound up applying. And, while I was working at SBJ, I was part-time in the sport management program at the time. So, nights and weekends. And then, throughout, going back to school, I had a few different career changes. And some of them were through the program, just through the like listings of career opportunities. So I then started working with Major League Baseball Players Association and their nonprofit. That was a Lucas, referral. Like he got the job posting and circulated it out. So yeah, most of my career, I would say, has been so far in like the intersection of sports and like nonprofit and sports and like what's now considered ESG. So environment, governance, and social. So working in like the space of community relations, social impact, sport for good. Right now, I'm actually at an organization called EverFi. And I work primarily with the sports clients, so National Hockey League and Major League Baseball. We create products that courses, really, educational courses that are free of charge to K through 12 schools. And then organizations such as the National Hockey League and Major League Baseball sponsor them. So I work essentially on partnerships. And it's again like a great combination of all the experiences I have had working, in CSR for the National Hockey League and for, National Fitness Foundation in development. So excited to take my experiences and now bring them to some of the students in the program as well.
Yeah, and you've been, as you mentioned, really closely connected with the program as a student, course associate, which we'll talk about as well, and now the program manager for our class program. Tell us about, if you could, from your perspective, the evolution of the program. As you mentioned, when you took the program and started, it was a part-time only program. When you began it. Lucas Rubin, the godfather of our program, who we hold in very high regard in our neck of the woods, as really the person who really pushed for the creation of the program. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so my experience so different from what I've seen now. Again, being a course associate and now working with class. Back in the day, it was Lucas Rubin, who was really like a one-person show. There was no LJ, there's no Bess. The career opportunities email, it was just like an email with links. I think it was a Word document attachment. So definitely like the times have changed, and rightfully so. Back in the day, again, like you would just like fax in your resume to like the NBA, and someone will call you in for an interview. Now that the industry has been coming in, increasingly more competitive, I think the program has developed and has expanded to meet those needs. So, having a career counselor, having different extracurricular activities. Like we didn't have elevator pitch sessions. We didn't have sessions where people would come and talk to us. Like there were other programs that, we kind of worked with, and, this is no discredit to Lucas at all, but it's just like, it's developed so differently. When I was a student, there were only part-time students. So I only had a cohort of like 12 to 17 classmates, and they all were working full time. So very, very different. But I think, it's seeing the evolution of the program is very inspiring, and everyone should be grateful for what they're able to experience today, because we didn't have that many additional programs and opportunities. But again, it's because the nature of the business is so much more competitive, and I think it's just like a proper response that the times and how the times are changing.
Yeah, and it's interesting you point that out. I mean, so the program has certainly evolved over time, right? I mean, when you were taking it was part-time only, there were only 13 courses, 11 of which you had to take, and you had a choice of whether you would either do an internship or a project to satisfy the last requirement. A handful of the courses weren't even in and specific to sports management, right? They were more generic finance or accounting or management courses. It was just different, right? And as it's evolved over time, we now have almost 36 courses, and more than that in terms of number of faculty members, and then the staff around the program, and our orbit has expanded with with a full-time program, director in me, and deputy director in LJ, and associate director in Danny, and just so many, and Bess and Tony Ponsoro on the career side, and Joe Favorito on the PR communication side. I mean, it really is, and two additional, full-time faculty members in Grant, Sun, and Elmore. So it really is, it's a different world now than when you took the program. But we still remember our roots. Lucas is still invited to everything that we do, It's important to remember where you've been, in the past. So you're going to lead a new initiative for our program as we constantly evolve and add new co-curricular, extracurricular programming, and obviously we evolve our in-class experience too, with new courses created periodically. But you're going to lead a new initiative for us, which is actually going to be a graduation requirement for the students. It's what we call a zero credit graduation requirement. So there's not an academic credit. Students aren't paying to do this, right? In other words, but they do have to complete the requirement in order to graduate. So tell us about this new initiative that we're kicking off, and from name to everything else.
Yeah, so CLASP, as we're calling it, I love a good acronym. So Community Leadership and Service Program. So, as you mentioned, zero credit course will be a graduation requirement. It'll allow students the opportunity to get hands-on, like real-world experience outside the classroom, working with a sports nonprofit. So all the organizations that we've engaged around this program are 501c3s. They're doing the work out in the field to bring more opportunities to youth, to people with disabilities, to minorities. And I just think like this is, again, another way that the program is evolving to meet the changes that we're experiencing in the sports industry and in society as a whole. Coming from a sports nonprofit and social impact departments, I've seen how important it is to give back to communities. And I think, that's also in the fabric of Columbia as a university, giving back in your footprint and giving back to those who need it. But I also think that it really allows students the opportunity to use their skills, outside the box. Like, what are they able to experience that they might come into this program and say, okay, well, I have this like great like skills like of fundraising, like, I raise money to run a race or in support of a nonprofit, but like I'm never going to use that again. So I think it allows students to think outside the box and use their skills, and also support organizations where they need help. So this isn't a volunteer opportunity where you're going to be like coaching soccer or folding t-shirts or something like that. Like, this is project-based work that will be done for the most part virtually. So it's analyzing data. It's creating, databases in Salesforce. It's helping with year-end outreach for, development and fundraising and capital campaigns. It's, doing research for some of the projects that the nonprofits are putting together annual reports. So I think, it's important work for the nonprofits, but it's also important for students to get this experience and understand how nonprofits work. Because the one thing I'll say is, like, having worked for nonprofits before, you wear many different hats. You get your feet wet in a lot of different things. And I think like those experiences, you really, you have to learn them, outside the classroom. So excited for this. I think, we've received some great feedback from the pilot, and looking forward to, formally launching this semester.
Yeah, and if you think about this, I mean, when we were contemplating the creation of this program and kind of where it came from. So, when I was in law school, there was a pro bono public service requirement, right, for all the students. And it was really actually one of my first teaching experiences. I volunteered teaching in public high schools, teaching law to public high school students in Philadelphia. But it really, different people did really cool things, and representing indigent clients, really great way to get experience. And at the same time, more importantly, really create this expectation that those in a leadership position have a responsibility to pay it forward, right? In that sense, we're all very fortunate to be in the position that we are in, and I think with that power comes an obligation, right? With that great fortune that we've had comes an obligation. So then it's okay, well, here's how we want to do it. The devil's in the details. And who can we pick to, who do we know, who can we pick to lead this for us, to be the administrator behind the program? And there was one person that came to mind, and you were that person, Jackie, right? And it was immediate. It was like, okay, and Jackie can run this. Let's hope that she's interested. And we're so fortunate that you are, and that you've taken this on. This is not easy, right? This is not easy work on your end. What's been the biggest challenge for you as you've developed this new program? We've run a pilot with it already, right? We did some beta testing with it. But what's the biggest challenge been? Any unexpected surprises, positively or negatively? What's it been like so far from your end?
Yeah, so I will say, when we launched the pilot, it was like in the December, January timeframe. And obviously this is something completely out of everyone's control, but COVID was spiking and it was a little slow to start because a lot of the organizations were looking for help with their spring galas and spring fundraisers, and pushing out, springtime is the time when nonprofits hold events and tournaments and showcases to really fundraise. And so that was a little difficult, trying to navigate that, because there was so much uncertainty around are they going to have these events? Do they, what are they going to look like? Are they in person or are they virtual? And so I've taken note of that. And I think, trying to shy away from some of those types of large scale events will be helpful from a programmatic perspective. But I also think one of the things is really just managing expectations from the nonprofit side and the student side. So, nonprofits, similar to how our program was in the beginning, it's a one-man show. These organizations usually only have less than 5 full-time staffers on payroll. And so it's hard because, again, it's great in that they wear many hats, but it's just their time is limited, their resources are limited, which is great that we're creating class, but it's trying to sit down and have a conversation with them and be okay, this is what CLASP is, how can we help you? Because sometimes they're throwing well, we want someone 5 days a week, 5 hours a day. And I'm no, this is project-based work, 40 hours a semester minimum. So managing their expectations and also the students' expectations. The most feedback I think I receive from students negatively, which I never think feedback is negative. I think negative feedback is good feedback. Let's take it and use this wisely. And this is helpful information, but it's just needing more direction from the organizations and understanding what their role is, which I think is part of the process. You're building out, your skills, not just from an academic standpoint, but, from a personal standpoint, a professional standpoint. So sometimes the nonprofits might not get back to you for 48 hours, but I think you have to make sound decisions and judgments to judgment calls for what's expected and what your next steps are. And I'm here as a resource, as a guide, and always please come to me. But I think just understanding the expectations from both the student perspective and the nonprofit perspective.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. And I think that it's one of the reasons why you were the first person to come to mind on all this. You've got considerable experience in this space from different angles, right? Whether it's the property side, whether with the NHL, specifically, or from the brand side, from the nonprofit side of American Cancer Society and that, and National Fitness Foundation. So there's really, you've kind of seen it from every angle. What do you think the typical student experience with the CLASP program is going to be like? If there is one at all.
Yeah, I would say just, kind of I think working with a nonprofit, an organization that is trying to move the needle forward and being able to support them, again, on project-based work. So having an introduction with a nonprofit, understanding their mission, and then taking the project and kind of running with it. I think the organizations really trust the students to take something and go with it, obviously within the confines of the guidelines of the project and the goals and objectives of the project. But I think, we've had great experiences. what I've seen from the pilot, like some of the students were like, wow, I never knew that this was an aspect of the sports industry. I never knew that this nonprofit existed. And like, this was such a great experience. Like, you know, Beat the Streets Wrestling, they have this massive event in Times Square, and like all the different aspects that go into it. Like, the student who worked with them was just like, wow, I never knew this existed. It was such a great experience. Like, everyone was so welcoming and helpful, and like, you know, they even said that the student was amazing. So that, I think that's like my goal. But I think like typically it's just being able to support an organization, like moving their objectives, business objectives forward, and understanding like how nonprofits function. You know, they are very different breed. Nonprofits are very different from a sports league or a team. And I think it's important to have that, you know, baseline information and foundation.
No, I completely agree. And, you know, just to be clear about this, so there's an hours requirement during the time the students are in the program, right? So full-time students, if you matriculate as a full-time student, will be 40 hours during the time in the program. And a part-time will be 20 hours. You can start as a part-time student, trying to balance, you know, and think about what is reasonable on each side. So you've obviously been involved, as we talked about, in the program from a lot of different perspectives at this point. Now you're essentially the professor for this course, that's the new requirement. You're actually going to get to know and interact with every student in the program as a result of this, which is it is unique among faculty. No one has all, you know, have an entire cohort in their course, right? Because required courses are broken up into different sections, and there's different faculty members. You're going to have everyone in the program, which is actually really cool. I mean, it's something I'm a bit jealous of. We get to know them, but we don't have a direct working relationship. We know every student in our program, obviously, but we don't get to have them in the classroom, so to speak, or supervise them across the board. And so you get to do that. And I'm actually kind of jealous about that. You know, when to think about, you know, student experience and thus, I mean, it's, you know, I'm wondering if this is going to answer this question. I'll change it in a year, but share your thoughts, if you could, on the students that we have in our sports management program. You know, what makes them stand out? You know, and what are the things that you're looking for them to accomplish via class?
Yeah, I mean, just having, you know, been in the classroom, you know, last fall, like as a course associate, being able to work with a few different students in two different courses, I think like I've noticed like how, you know, the student body has evolved. Again, not so different from when I was a student. I think these students are more engaged, they're more involved, they're looking to see what other opportunities exist outside the classroom to kind of put themselves ahead of others, like especially when it comes to, you know, looking for a job or a role once they graduate. I think like I have learned more from the students than I had from like my cohorts when I was in the program. Like these students, like the amount of knowledge they have on so many different, you know, subjects out there. Like, you know, we're talking about like cryptocurrency and NFTs. Like we didn't have those back in like 2013 when I was in the program. Like those didn't exist. So I think it's helpful for me because it's like keeping me like engaged and understanding like the trends. And I think that's really helpful, you know, as someone who's also like looking at a program and wanting to take this program and make it the best version of itself. But I also think like, you know, they're just so organized. Like some of the students that we had in the pilot, just like their communication style, like getting back to me right away and asking me my thoughts on things, and like how they're able to manage their course load and communication style, I think is better than I've ever experienced. Also, you know, in the workplace, like having worked with interns in the workplace, and understanding that, you know, internships might be not be a priority to some others, but like I think in this program, like we have so many like super highly focused and intelligent students that I think they're here for a reason, and I've been learning so much from them.
No, it truly is. And I, you know, as someone who's been teaching since 1998. I still say to this day, I learn more from the students than I teach them. There's no question about it. It really is, in many respects, the best part of the job, right, so to speak. All right, so let's pivot a little bit. What do you like to do in your free time?
So, I don't know if I would say I'd like to do this, but I'm training for my 6th marathon. It's going to be in Dublin, Ireland. Also fundraising for it. So through the American Cancer Society, I just think like being able to accomplish something like a marathon and doing it for like a greater good, is important to me. So most of my free time has been running. But also, I live right outside New York City in Hoboken. I love, taking the ferry into the city and exploring new different restaurants, obviously watching some of my favorite sports teams and going to baseball games and hockey games. So, very grateful to live in, the sports center essentially of the world. It's awesome.
So, and who do you root for? Besides for, of course, the Columbia Lions, right?
Yes, of course, the Columbia Lions. And the NYU Violets, I guess. Not their football. There's no football team, but basketball. Yeah, so I'm a big Yankees fan. My boyfriend and I are massive baseball fans. He's a White Sox fan. He's from Western Michigan, so went to a lot of White Sox and Yankees games so far this season. Also a big Rangers fan. I would say other sports, I love to watch women's sports. I think they don't get enough appreciation. I love women's basketball. I love watching women's basketball and women's hockey. Big fan of, women's national team. I think, whenever they're playing or, I love the Olympic season. I think it's just so great to like root around a national women's team. So.
Fully agree on that, both in terms of attention, media, and otherwise, and how good the product is, and how it continues to get better, which is a ton of fun, of course, to see, and will only continue to get better going forward. Right? All right, well, Jackie, thank you so much for the time today. We greatly appreciate it. Really look forward to having you back and hear down the road about the growth of class and all the good stuff you've got going on both at Columbia and in your full-time professional career at Everfi. Again, thank you so much for taking the time today to have the conversation. A reminder to our to the participants that we do have an information session coming up for the program, one of our monthly sessions. The next one is on August 23rd. The information will be put into the chat, and there you go. Thank you, Mike, to register for that. You just click on that link and you can register for that upcoming information session. We really get into kind of the nuts and bolts of the program and go a lot deeper into everything regarding the application process to all the points of the program itself. But for today, that'll do it for us. Again, this has been the 4th edition of the Conversations with Faculty series with Columbia University Sports Management Program. I'm Scott Rosner, Jackie Bartolomeo. Thank you so much, and stay well.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your summer, everyone.